Hello and welcome to English 2450, COM 2010, Intro to Film, Week 8, Lecture Video number 4 on Continuity Editing. So to define continuity editing, which is a specific editing style, it was the most dominant editing style throughout film history, started between 1900 and 1910. Now this is when film editors began using editing techniques to create clear and coherent stories. In the documentary that we watched in class, The Cutting Edge, they really attribute this style of continuity editing to Edwin S. Porter, who was an employee of Thomas Edison's, and the director and editor of the life of, I believe it's The Life of an American Firefighter, if I'm remembering the title correctly. Now that was a film in 1904, and it's one of the first examples of a filmmaker using editing to kind of piece different things together to tell a cohesive story. And that's where they show the firefighters leaving the station, kind of rushing off to the burning house. You see the people in the house and you get, kind of editing across these two different events to show that they're related to each other. Now, this becomes the dominant editing style throughout classical Hollywood. Continuity editing specifically seeks to achieve something known as seamlessness. You cannot see the seams. You can't see where the film is pieced back together. Now, Susan Hayward, in her book Key Concepts in Cinema Studies, she says seamlessness is a key effect of continuity editing and is used to refer to the Hollywood film style where, in the name of realism, the editing does not draw attention to itself. The spectator is presented with a narrative that is edited in such a way that it appears to have no breaks, no disconcerting, unexplained transitions in time and space. That's seamlessness, where the spectator, the audience, cannot see the way that the film is pieced together because the editing does not draw attention to itself. This creates the illusion of a coherent and total story world that we become completely immersed in. And this is the dominant way to edit a film throughout classical Hollywood. Now, because continuity editing is trying very hard to keep us immersed in the story world, to keep us from kind of questioning the artifice of the film, there are a lot of rules that the editor, the filmmaker, the cinematographer have to follow collaboratively to make sure that the end product is totally cohesive and seamless. Now, we talked about one of these in class, the 180-degree rule. The 180-degree rule essentially states that any scene filmed in a movie has an axis of action or a center line. Now, this is a line that runs through the center of the action and creates a half circle area on either side, a 180-degree half circle area, where the camera can be placed to present the action and maintain consistent relative positions between characters, objects, settings, and the viewer. So if I have a 180-degree semicircle, let's just say that I'm going to cut across the middle of the screen here. This is my center line. Everything on this side of the screen, this semicircle, if I put my camera over here to film what's on the other side of the line, then everything is going to remain in kind of a consistent order and consistent relative positions. As soon as I cross the 180-degree line, as soon as I cross the axis of action with my camera, suddenly it looks like I flipped things. It looks like my characters are in different places than they were before. The action is moving in a different direction, and this might be disorienting or jarring to the viewer. Typically, if we're sticking with continuity editing, we don't want to break this 180-degree rule. We want it to seem as if the characters are in the same position relative to one another and to us, that if there's action on the screen, that it's moving in the same direction relative to us. By maintaining that 180-degree rule, we make sure that that happens. Now, another rule of continuity editing is called the 30-degree rule. And the 30-degree rule essentially states that every camera should be positioned at least 30 degrees away from the nearest camera. Now, this is so when you're editing the film footage together, if you jump from camera A to camera B, there's enough of a difference between where those two cameras are placed so that our mind does not perceive that cut as a glitch. If you have two cameras, camera A and camera B, and they're very, very close together on set, you show a shot from camera A and then you show a shot from camera B, it's going to look like there's a glitch. There isn't enough of a jump in the distance between those two cameras to make it seem as if we're cutting. It just looks like an odd kind of glitch or flicker on the screen. And that can be a little bit disorienting as well. It creates a jump cut. Unless you have those cameras 30 degrees apart from each other in that semicircle, you're going to have what's called a jump cut. You're also going to want to make sure that you use a technique called eyeline matches. Now, this is a cut where the first shot, shot A, shows a person looking off in one direction. The second shot, shot B, shows a nearby space containing what that person sees. This is where eye lines match up. We know that the character is looking off screen to something that's happening or someone or some object, and then when we see shot B, we expect that what we see in that second shot is the thing that was being looked at. This is the same general idea of the establishing shot and the interior. We know that if we put shots A and shots B next to each other, that they should ideally be related. So if in shot A, the character is looking off screen right, and then we move on to shot B, we expect that whoever or whatever is in that spot is being looked at by the character from shot A. Eye line matches. The eye line matches what we see, what we expect the eye line to match. Another technique of continuity editing is called the match on action. Now, this is a cut that splices together two different views of the same action, making it seem like it continues uninterrupted. And it maintains screen direction, which means if the action was moving left to right in shot A, it's still moving left to right in shot B, maintaining screen direction. That goes back to the 180-degree rule. If you keep your camera in the right spot, you're going to maintain consistent screen direction. So match on action, we've already seen a lot of examples of this in the documentary and in the clips. This is when shot A is a character opening a door, shot B is them coming through the other side of the door, and it seems as if it's one continuous motion or a character turning around. Shot A shows them starting to turn, we cut, shot B shows a close-up of them having fully turned, and it's so smoothly done that it appears as if it's one continuous and uninterrupted motion. This is called matching on action, and it's a very common technique used in continuity editing. So the 180-degree rule, which maintains relative positions and screen direction, the 30-degree rule, which helps us avoid jump cuts, eyeline matches, which shows if a character is looking off into the distance at something, the next shot will show what they're looking at, and a match on action where you splice two different views together to make it look like an action is continuous. All of these are techniques used to create a seamless film experience where we're not taken out of the film, where we're totally immersed, where we're not focusing on the editing, because the editing isn't the point here, the storytelling is the point. Other important techniques of continuity editing include shot reverse shot, cross-cutting, and parallel editing. Now, shot reverse shot is one of the most basic parts of film grammar, to the extent where you probably have heard of this, or at the very least you've seen it in a lot of different things you've watched. Now, shot reverse shot is two or more shots that are edited together that alternate characters. Now, this is typically a way to show a conversation. You get an over-the-shoulder framing, and then you get the alternative perspective. So typically in a shot reverse shot, one good example, two characters sitting and eating at a table. Shot A will be behind one character's shoulder, showing the other character's facial expressions, and then you will get the reverse of that shot, behind the other character's shoulder, showing the first character's reactions. Shot reverse shot is one of the most common techniques of continuity editing. Cross-cutting and parallel editing, these terms are often used interchangeably, to the point where it's really difficult sometimes to suss out the difference between these two things, because In industry terms, cross-cutting and parallel editing are used simultaneously to mean the same thing, but according to some theorists, the main difference is temporal. Now, cross-cutting is a form of editing that alternates shots of two or more lines of action occurring in different places but simultaneously. Now, the most common use of this, and the first real use of this in cinema, is the rescue scene. Right? This is where the damsel in distress is being tied up to the train tracks by the sort of nefarious villain, and the hero is coming to rescue her. And you cross-cut between the damsel in distress and the hero. And this helps build tension by alternating these shots of two different lines of action, the villain tying down the damsel in distress, the other action being the hero rushing off to the rescue, but they're occurring in different places. We know, however, that they're occurring simultaneously, and that the closer the villain gets to, completing the deed, right, the closer the hero gets to saving the girl. So this is an example of cross-cutting. Parallel editing is very similar, but the important thing here is that the events are occurring at different times. This is a specific type of cross-cutting that shows two sets of events occurring at different times. So you might alternate shots of two or more lines of action, but they're not supposed to be occurring simultaneously like the rescue scene. They're happening at different times. So parallel editing is a little bit more specific, a little bit more nuanced. But both of these are really just forms of editing that show multiple events occurring in a way that doesn't draw attention to the fact that we're cutting back and forth. It seems very natural and very seamless. It doesn't necessarily draw attention to itself as an editing technique. It's just a storytelling device, really. The focus in all of these techniques is telling a story and keeping the audience immersed in that story. But the important thing to keep in mind here is that continuity editing and seamlessness are not the only way to make a film. They are not the only way to make a film. Just because they are the dominant style, especially throughout classical Hollywood, does not mean that there are not alternatives to this particular style of editing. Now, one alternative is an increased focus on graphic and or rhythmic possibilities in film. Now, this could probably be called post-classical editing style or MTV editing style. Post-classical or MTV. Because if we think about post-classical and MTV editing, really a lot of music video editing and newer film editing focuses on connecting scenes or connecting shots through images, connecting shots to create a certain rhythm. It's less focused on telling a story and creating a spatial and temporal story world that makes sense, but it's more focused on creating a certain image, an aesthetic, an emotional reaction. And music videos are a great example of this. A lot of music videos are narrative and do follow continuity editing style, but because the music video form does not need to tell a story, a lot of times the way that those films are edited is more focused on other parts of the filmmaking process, the aesthetic, the affective. Another alternative to continuity editing that goes further back is Soviet montage style, which is an approach that was developed in the 1920s that emphasizes the dynamic, the discontinuous between the shots. It juxtaposes unrelated images to create ideas that were not present in either shot by itself. A great example of this is Sergei Eisenstein's Strike. There is a link to this in the Canvas page. I would really encourage you to watch it and to think about how this style of editing is different than continuity editing, is different than Hollywood classical style. And we already talked a little bit about the jump cut. Now, the jump cut was developed really by French New Wave directors in like the 1960s or so, and this is when the two shots of the same subject are cut together, but not sufficiently different in the camera distance and angle. This creates a jump or a glitch on the screen, and we saw really great examples of this in the editing documentary, but this is an alternative to continuity editing. This is disjarring and disorientating, and it's used for a specific reason other than kind of storytelling. So the important thing to keep in mind here is that The continuity system is only one way to tell a story. This system has been the dominant one historically. It is not an artistic necessity. It is not an artistic necessity.